It's February, which is the last month of meteorological winter. And it's been a very long winter as well. I'm looking forward to the longer, warmer days of spring and summer. I really can't wait. We might not be out of the woods just yet. There is about a month or so left of winter, but there are things which we can be sowing now in February in anticipation for the warmer months ahead. If your fingers are itching to get sowing just like mine are, and you want a head start on the growing season, then you might want to sow some of these in February. Now, we went over these in the January sowing video, but we're going to go over them again because you can sow them in February as well. And those are peppers. Whether you're sowing sweet bell peppers or chilies, you can get them sown in February as well. I've got a few nice varieties of bell peppers which I'm growing. I've got King of the North, which I recently picked up actually. This is an extra packet. I wanted to grow these as well because these better suited for cooler climates, so if we get a poor summer, hopefully these will perform quite well. I've got a variety called Fiesta as well, which is a nice yellow bell pepper, and I've also got New Ace as well, which is just a standard bell pepper, that one. So you can sow sweet peppers or chili peppers in February, but they require warmth to grow. We start them off early because they take a long time to grow, but they need to be at home on a grow light shelf if you have grow lights, or on a bright south-facing windowsill that's warm. A temperature of at least 21 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit yields best results when growing peppers from seeds. They do like the warm conditions, so you're going to get the best results if you start them off on a heat mat or in a heated propagator. Just remember, when you are starting them off on a heated propagator, to remove the lid once them seeds germinate, because you don't want to cause issues like damping off and things like that. Sow seeds in a seed starting mix of your choice. I like to just get some multi-purpose compost and sieve it to remove any large clumps, and sow seeds about 1 centimetre deep. Once them seeds get the first set of tree leaves, prick them out into 9 centimetre pots and then grow them on. And then once you've reached your last frost date for your area, bring them down to the garden or down to your allotment and grow them on in your greenhouse or your polytunnel. They can be grown outside, but they'll perform much better if you grow them under cover. Now, you can start sowing some cucumbers in February as well, especially if you're going to be growing these in a greenhouse or a polytunnel. I've got a couple of nice varieties here which I like to grow. I grow this variety every single year. This is called Mini Munch. It's a snacking cucumber. It's a hybrid as well, so it's very, very vigorous. It produces a lot of cucumbers. This is a lovely choice. And I'm also going to be growing some of these Burp Plus Tasty Green as well. I think they're called that because you don't burp after you eat them. Typically when you eat a cucumber, you can be quite gassy afterwards and burp quite a lot, but it's said that you don't burp when you eat this variety. Anyway, we're going to be growing some of those as well in the greenhouse, and with those, just sow them in 9 centimetre pots of multi-purpose compost on a bright south-facing windowsill or under grow lights if you have them. These are not frost hardy, and they do require some warmth to get going, just like the peppers and the aubergines. So you're going to want to get these started off at home, definitely, in February. And then, hopefully by the time you get to your last frost date, for us that's around the middle of May, we should have some lovely little cucumber plants ready to be planted out into the polytunnel. So yeah, get them sown in February if you're wanting some lovely cucumbers in your greenhouse or your polytunnel. If you're going to be growing cucumbers outside though, it's probably best to delay sowing until March or April. Now, we're going to go over tomatoes in this video. Now, I said in January that I'm not going to be sowing tomatoes yet until March, and I'm sticking to my guns. I'm not going to be sowing tomatoes until March. But in February, if you have a heated greenhouse, maybe you have a south-facing conservatory at home, or maybe you have a grow light system that is big enough to support big tomato plants and flowers, get them started off in February if you want. Just remember though that tomatoes grow incredibly fast, much faster than the peppers and the aubergines. Like, you can end up with a tomato plant that's 12 inches tall in a matter of weeks. They'll take 2 weeks to germinate, and then about 2-3 weeks after that, your tomato plant will be getting to quite a decent size pretty fast. So yeah, if you're sowing these in February, just make sure you've got enough space to accommodate them. Tomatoes are not frost hardy, and you don't want a plant that's ready to be planted out into your beds outside or into your greenhouse or your polytunnel before your last frost date. Now, some people started off their onions as early as Christmas. I'm one of those people. I started my onions off from seed on Boxing Day, which is a traditional time for many gardeners to get their onion seeds sown. But if you've not sown them yet, don't worry, there's still plenty of time to sow them. February is a good month for sowing them. Whether you're doing them from seed or from sets, you can get them sown in February. I've sown 3 varieties from seed: Ayrshire Craig, Rheinsberger and Red Magnate. 3 lovely varieties. They're coming along really well at home under the grow lights. I've sown them all in module trays, and I'm going to be thinning them out very soon as well into their individual cells, I think, and I'll probably be moving them down to the greenhouse in about a month or 2 as well. Now, when it comes to starting onions from seed, you can sow them in trays of multi-purpose compost. Sow them about 1 centimetre deep, sprinkle some vermiculite on top, or you can start them off in modules as well. You can start them off on a bright south-facing windowsill that gets plenty of warmth, or you can start them off under a grow light shelf like I have. You can even start them off in the greenhouse as well if you want, because they are cold hardy plants. They don't require as much warmth to get going and get growing as some of the other things, but for best results, a temperature of around 16 degrees Celsius is ideal for starting onions off from seed. So it might be best to start them off at home and then move them down to the greenhouse a little bit later. Now, if you're starting them from sets, you can get some modules just like this. That's what we've done there, and we've just stuck the onion sets in each module like that. It is much easier to grow onions from sets. There's not as many varieties available. They are a bit more expensive, and they are more likely to bolt than growing them from seed. There are pros and cons to both sides, but I like to grow them from seed. I'd say if you're a new gardener and you're just getting into it and you want something that's a bit easier to grow and doesn't take as long, grow onions from sets. But if you're up for a challenge, then start your onions from seed. I quite enjoy the process of growing them from seed. I find it very enjoyable, so that's what I do with that. Now, another vegetable which is similar to the leek, which you can sow in February, is what? Now, another vegetable which is similar to the onion, which you can sow in February, is leeks. I've got a variety here called Musselburgh, which I grow every single year. I'm going to be starting some of these off in February. I'll probably start some more off in March as well. They can be started off in the same way as onions. So you'll sow your leeks in February, and then a couple of months after that, they should start to get to about pencil thickness. And when they reach pencil thickness, that is when you want to plant them outside. You want to choose a spot that's not going to get used for quite a while, because leeks do use up space for quite a long time. And when you plant them, you want to use the back half of your trowel or a spade, or you can use a dibber if you have one. Make a hole that's at least 6 inches deep, and then just pop the leek in. You may want to trim the roots if the roots are really long. Just give them a quick trim with the scissors. But when you pop that leek in, you don't want to backfill it, because you want the soil around the leek to not be too compact. You want the leek to be able to grow and expand easily. So don't backfill it, just simply water the hole with your watering can and then just leave the leek. You want the leek to be buried deep because you want a nice blanched stem on the leek. Now, if your ground isn't frozen and it's workable in February, why not get some carrot seeds sown? I'm going to be sowing some of these outside direct in my raised beds this month, and I'm probably going to sow some in buckets in the greenhouse as well for an early start. I've got a few varieties which I'm growing this year which I'm really excited to grow. I've got early Nance, which is a good early variety. I'll probably sow these in buckets in the greenhouse for an early start. I'll probably pick these as baby carrots early on. I've got Autumn King, which, to be honest, I'm going to sow these later. These are more for late summer into autumn picking, so I'm not going to sow them yet. But I've got some sweet candle carrots here, which I'm really excited to try. I've not tried these ones yet. So yeah, sow them in February if your ground is workable. They may take a long time to germinate in February because it is cold, but they will eventually germinate. And carrots like a loose, sandy soil that isn't too rich in nutrients as well. They don't need loads of nutrients, and you want the soil to be nice and loose with no stones so that the carrot grows nice and straight and doesn't start forking. And if your soil is too rich, it can start growing out root hairs, which then will turn into a very mangled, mutated carrot. So you want nice, long, straight carrots. Now we can be sowing some brassicas in February as well. Now I'm going to be starting off some broccoli in February. I'm going to be making some early sowings of those in module trays in the greenhouse. I'm going to be growing quite a lot of broccoli this year because I found that we eat a lot of broccoli actually. We eat it every single week, so it makes sense to grow more of it. This variety is called Iron Man, which is a disease-resistant variety. But I've also got some of the autumn calabrese as well. When you pick the main head of this broccoli, it will then send out more broccoli shoots, also known as tender stem broccoli. So yeah, get some of those sown in February in your greenhouse, or on your windowsill at home if you want. Just bear in mind though that they need plenty of light, because if you don't give brassicas plenty of light and you grow them on the windowsill that's not light enough, you can get quite leggy plants. I found that brassicas are quite prone to becoming leggy in low light conditions. If you do end up with brassica plants that become leggy, when you transplant them, when you pot them on, just bury them a little bit deeper. Just make sure that stem is a bit buried and you should be fine with that. Now, more brassicas which we can sow in February. Sprouts. Now these aren't going to be ready till Christmas time, but I found it's beneficial to get a head start with these. The more growth that you get through the growing season, the better the sprouts will be for Christmas. So if you want an early start with your sprouts, get some of these sown in February, and they'll be planted outside about the same time as the broccoli, around April, May time hopefully. And the same with cabbages as well, and cauliflower. I've got some Golden Acre Primo 2 and all year round cauliflower. These cabbages are really nice. I grow these every single year, and I'm going to sow them the exact same way as the broccoli and the Brussels sprouts. I'm going to sow these in module trays in the greenhouse. So if you want to sow some of your brassicas in February, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbages, Brussels sprouts, get them sown in a greenhouse or a south-facing windowsill at home. They are frost hardy, they don't require warm conditions to germinate and grow, so you can get away with sowing these in an unheated greenhouse. Now you can be sowing some beetroot in February as well. I've already sowed some of these in January. I sowed the bolt hardy variety, which I grow every single year, a bolt resistant variety, and I've sown them in these module trays here. I did this the other week. I sowed 2 or 3 seeds per module. I grow them in clumps, and then around March time I'll transplant the whole clump into my raised beds outside. That's one way of doing it. If you want, you can direct sow your beetroot seeds in raised beds or in the open ground, or even in containers if you want. They are quite cold hardy, so you can get away with direct sowing these outside if your ground is not frozen. Just bear in mind that they're going to take longer to germinate outside than they do in your greenhouse. So that is why I sow them in module trays in the greenhouse early on, to give them a nice head start. I've also got some of these lovely golden beetroot as well, which I'm going to be sowing probably in March. So yeah, February, get some beetroot sown if you love beetroot. I found it's much better than the stuff that you get pickled from the supermarket. It's a completely different world when you grow beetroot and eat it fresh from the garden. Now I sowed some of these in January, but February onwards is absolutely fine to sow them as well. Quite cold hardy things, just like the brassicas, the onions and the beetroot and the carrots. Lettuce. I've got a lovely packet of mixed lettuce here which I grow every single year. There's loads of different types in there: baby gem, cos lettuce, iceberg lettuce, red leaf lettuce, all sorts of different types. So it's a good economical pack of lettuce. I've sown these in these module trays here. No signs of them yet. I've sown 2 or 3 seeds per module, about 1 centimetre deep in here, and when they germinate I'll thin them down to 1 per module, and then around March, April time I will plant them out into my raised beds. As I said, they're quite cold hardy, so light frosts aren't going to damage them at all. Now, more leafy greens which we can sow in February is spinach. I've got this pack of American spinach here, which I'm going to be sowing in February, and this perpetual spinach as well. I've actually got some down here. I've still got quite a lot of spinach here actually, which I sowed last September, and I've overwintered these and they've done really well. I've made quite a few pickings of these, but I'm going to sow some in February in modules. I'm going to sow 2 or 3 per module, and then I'm going to plant them out in the raised beds around March, April time. I found that perpetual spinach bolts much slower than the traditional spinach, so I like to grow a bit of that. It gives a good continuous crop. If you want muscles like Popeye, eat a bit of spinach. It's a very, very healthy thing. Probably one of the most healthiest vegetables out there. A proper superfood. So it makes sense to grow some in your garden. So spinach, get some of that sown in February as well. Now maybe you've got your seed potatoes in February. Usually garden centres start to supply seed potatoes ready for chitting and planting around March, April time. So if you've got your seed potatoes in February, you might want to leave them out to chit and produce sprouts ready for planting a little bit later. This gives you a little bit of a head start as opposed to just planting the unchitted potato in your containers or your raised beds or wherever you're growing them. Lay them out in trays or egg cartons to start producing chits. Lay them somewhere that gets light but not direct sunlight or doesn't get too hot. You don't want to put them next to your radiator at home because that can make them shrivel up. Likewise, you don't want to leave them on a south-facing windowsill in direct sunlight all day because that can make them shrivel and dry up as well. I found that somewhere like a north-facing windowsill in your kitchen or somewhere like that, somewhere that doesn't get scorched by the direct sun. You don't want to store them somewhere dark though, because then you'll end up with massive long triffid things, massive long shoots coming up. I'm sure you've had this happen to you as well. When you've had potatoes in the cupboard at home and you forgot about them, you come back a few weeks later and they've just grown massive long shoots like that. So yeah, make sure to get sunlight. Now we're going to go over some flowers that you can sow in February as well. It's not just about the vegetables and the fruits. Get some of them flowers sown as well. Sweet peas are a good one to sow in February. Some people like to sow their sweet peas in the autumn. Some people like to sow them in January, February, March, April. Doesn't really matter, it's all preference really. If you've not sown them already, get them sown in February. Absolutely fine, no problems there. They're quite cold hardy as well. They don't require that much warmth to grow, so an unheated greenhouse should suffice. I sowed them the other week in these root trainers, and yeah, they should germinate slowly through February and start growing happily through the spring. I'll probably plant these outside around April time, with all being well. And yeah, you can sow them in the root trainers. You can sow them in 9cm pots. You can sow them in toilet roll tubes as well if you want. I found that that's a really good one. Sow a couple of seeds per toilet roll tube, and then when it comes to planting them out, you can just plant the entire thing out. You don't even have to remove them from the paper tube. It literally is as simple as that. And I've got a few tips about growing sweet peas as well. When your sweet pea plants grow to around 6 to 8 inches in height, pinch out the growing tips, because this will encourage the sweet pea plant to send out side shoots, and in turn you will get more flowers when you do this. You want the sweet pea to develop these side shoots and start branching out all over the place. And pick your sweet pea flowers through the summer as much as you possibly can. The more you pick them, the more they're going to produce. And if you find that you have missed some and the flowers start setting seed and turning into seed pods, pick those seed pods off as soon as you see them and discard of them, because that will just direct more of the plant's energy into producing more flowers as well. There's loads of options of things you can grow your sweet peas up as well. I grow them up these pallets which I've hammered into the ground, and I've also attached some old chicken wire to them as well. That works really well and it didn't cost me anything. You can make a wigwam system as well if you want. You can grow them up an archway. If you have a trellis in your garden, they are ideal for growing sweet peas up. But if you've not got the space or the materials to build these big support systems or grow these tall varieties of sweet peas, you can just grow the dwarf varieties. Certain varieties only grow to about 2 feet tall, so there are options available for you if you don't want to grow the tall varieties. Now there are other flowers which you can be sowing in the month of February as well, but these are probably best sown at home where it's warm. A bright windowsill, grow lights if you have them, and those are things such as marigolds, petunias, antirrhinums, or also known as snapdragons, geraniums, cosmos. These can be sown in February for some lovely blooms through the spring and summer months. So that was some of the things which you can sow in February, and some of those I'm going to be sowing in February as well. Do let me know in the comments below if there's anything that you think I've missed on this list, and let me know what you guys are sowing as well. I'd love to know what you guys are up to in the month of February, and if you found this video useful and informative, do hit that like button because it helps a lot, helps me reach more people and teach more people as well. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help people, help the new gardeners and even the more experienced gardeners as well with their gardening. So that's all for now, guys. Hope to see you in the next one. Happy gardening, happy sowing, and stay safe.